Are there too few male characters in Wuthering Waves? This is a question I've seen on social media over and over again lately, and unfortunately there's been a piece of misinformation going around that people have been taking as fact. So in a few minutes, I'm gonna have to debunk that. But let's start from the start. So excluding Rover, and including Yinlin and Jian, Wuthering Waves 1.0 launched with 10 female characters versus 6 male characters. That's 11 and 7 respectively if you count male and female Rover. From the very beginning, the ratio was skewed heavily in favor of female characters. So what's bothering people? Well, there are a few different arguments I've seen personally. The first is that Jian was heavily advertised towards the beginning of the game, which led people to believe that male characters would have more of a presence than in other gacha games. That's fairly understandable, and I mean the male characters in Wuthering Waves do look great. Some people reportedly feel that they were baited into playing the game, with the promise that there would be more cool male characters for them to collect. And yet, since 1.0, the ratio has absolutely kept its female skew. 1.1 released 2 female characters, Changli and Jinshi, which were both very well received in my opinion. 1.2 introduced Jeje and Shangli Yao. I think it's safe to say that Shangli Yao was pretty popular with a certain demographic, especially after his trailer debuted, which showed the dark version of Shangli Yao, who has given way to a lot of awesome fan art. You know it's good when there's a lot of fan art. But then we were told that 1.3 is going to have another 2 female characters, Shorekeeper and Yuhu. And to make matters worse for male character fans, version 1.4 was confirmed to feature 2 new female characters, Camellia and Lumi. I can understand why things would feel rough if you only wanted to play male characters, or at least primarily play for them. Because at the end of the day, I think it's really important to remember that these male character enjoyers often really like the female characters too. It's just that their primary reason for playing is the male characters. And speaking of the female characters, the second reason I've seen people feel discontented is related to the design of the female characters, or how they behave. I'm sure we can all agree that most of the female characters in Wuthering Waves have pretty good designs. The biggest problem is that they're very similar. And I'd personally argue that's the case for male characters as well. They're quite homogenized. All the female characters have bare shoulders, bare legs, detached sleeves. It's like they all get their clothes made by the same person. And it kind of prevents them from feeling super unique, in my opinion. Yeah, not every female character needs to be wearing pants or anything baggy or anything like that, but 1 or 2 wearing something a little different would be good, in my opinion. Just to spice things up. May I remind you how wonderful Yinlin looks in a suit? That's what I want personally. But not always, and again, I think that's a good distinction to make. But it goes beyond just design. Let's be real. The physics in this game are kind of all over the place. They actually make sense for some characters. You get the impression that Yang Yang and Sanhua are wearing quite tight clothing that's keeping things together, let's just say that. It feels more natural. And then you've got whatever's going on Baiju's sequence screen. As Twitter has reminded me, the waves do be wuthering. But it's just so inconsistent. I mean, you have that, and then you have Changli's walking animation, which is just ridiculous. Like, it's silly to the point of not even being sexy, you know? I don't know about you guys, but I think the closer it hits to realism, the better it is. How did this become the jiggle video? I would say Punishing Grey Raven's physics aren't super realistic either, but they have a lot more weight to them. And the weight is good. But these things in Wuthering Waves often just look like jello. And the best example is Jeju. I don't know what they were thinking with that ultimate. Why did they do this to her? It doesn't look good, it just looks very silly. But maybe I'm in the minority here, and jello is what the people want. You'll just have to let me know in the comments. Anyway, the third thing that left male character fans wanting was actually the story. Now, personally, all of the 1.0 story left me wanting, but I'll get into that in a minute. The main issue that I've seen around is that male characters didn't play a big enough part in the story. Yuan Wu and Lingyang just kind of appear out of nowhere. Kuro isn't even there, and Jian is there, but in my opinion, he leaves a much better impression in his companion quest than he does in the main story. I think everyone had a good laugh at him just handing off all the battle plans to Rover. but I honestly think that's just a problem with how rushed 1.0 was. It had to change drastically due to player feedback from the first closed beta. And it's no surprise that corners were cut. Everything in 1.1 and 1.2 so far has been a lot better quality-wise. It's almost like when Kuro isn't forced to change things, they can actually just push out a quality product, who knew? And look, I completely understand this perspective. The reason I play these games is because they have so many cool female characters in them compared to your AAA games or whatever. I mean, there are male protagonists in those for days. I just want some ladies. But I get it. Considering that Shangli Yao shares a very similar role to Kuro, and no one wants to play Lingyang because he's weak and his design kinda sucks, I'm sorry, I'll never forgive him for replacing a Wu, my son. The pain just doesn't go away. But it's not just women who are excited about the male characters. As I said, Kuro Games makes some really cool male characters. So there's also a lot of guys who are fans of them too. I think it's safe to say anyone could be a fan of cool male characters. Unfortunately, there's a piece of misinformation that's been spread around that has been getting people's hopes up for no reason. That misinformation was an interview that was done a while back with Solon, the producer of Wuthering Waves. People allege, thanks to what I believe was machine translation, that Solon said that they were working on more male characters or something to that effect. So I've seen a lot of people on social media parrot this mistranslation and spread it around like it's fact and be mad when, for example, the 1.3 characters turned out to be female. Thanks to our good friend Photis, who translated this part for us, I can start by telling you that the context of this clip is that Solon is explaining how their way of making characters will survive the oversaturated market because they take a dynamic approach to appeal to the worldwide audience by taking into account different reception to characters in different regions. In other words, they're listening to everyone. Translated, he says, "You will find today that we have in fact made something we ourselves think is very good, whether it's a female character or a male character. In different regions worldwide, for example, Japan, Korea, the US, and China, everyone's reaction and data presented by the character are actually very different." So he's not saying that they're going to make more male characters. He's actually saying that the team at Kuro Games listens to a worldwide audience and is collecting data points from around the world. This should be pretty good news for us and proves, as they say, that Kuro Games is listening. But unfortunately for male character fans, it's not any confirmation that more male characters will be coming in the future. I mean, of course there will be some, but it might be best to temper your expectations and expect the current ratio going forward if that's what's successful for Kuro Games. At the end of the day, any company is going to follow the money. So any character who is very successful in their banner will probably have some kind of influence on the game going forward, be they male or female. Hopefully that helps clear things up, and also is a good reminder to not just blindly believe in machine translation. Punishing Grey Raven, which Kuro Games also makes, had a decent amount of male characters coming in to begin with, but in recent years has skewed much more heavily in favor of female characters. In my personal opinion, it doesn't help that the male characters are all kind of only okay. Like, they don't have crazy designs like the female characters do that absolutely blow me away. A lot of them are just kind of your average guy. But I'm also not really into male characters, so I am not the target demographic here. I do love an evil man though. Give me that dark Shangli Yao, the confidence, the flamboyance. I wish we had him instead of regular Shangli Yao. And considering his popularity in fan art, I do wonder if that's the case for a lot of other people too. Maybe we'll get some guys in the future who are super cool. Speaking of future male characters, I know there are a lot of people excitedly waiting for the likes of Scar or Geshu Lin to become playable, or for Kuro to be relevant to the story for that matter. I do have some thoughts there. In Punishing Grey Raven, the story spent a long time setting up the villains before they became playable, minus Alpha, who was one of the first characters to release. The main villain, Luna, became playable after about a year, and the story meanwhile gave players a lot of high expectations for her. She was extremely cool when she dropped, and it was awesome to learn some more about her backstory. I can see something similar happening with the likes of Scar and Frolova. Kuro Games will spend ages building them up, making them a force to be reckoned with, before finally making them playable. And hopefully they'll follow the PGR route of letting them stay evil, even when they become playable. Let's just say Luna killed a lot of defenseless people right before she became playable. and others committed many crimes after becoming playable. PGR is so good. With Geshu Lin, his story seems quite personal to GN, so I imagine they're trying to get all this stuff with Rover out of the way first, and let us learn more about Rover, before tackling these more personal, intimate stories with the other characters. And as for Kuro, his bio states that he's from a place called New Federation. I might be totally off the mark, but I'm gonna go ahead and assume that he'll have something to do with us reaching that new region when we do. Kind of like how Encore is going to be relevant to the Black Shores area. In any case, I think it's safe to say that patience is key when it comes to the good characters in Wuthering Waves. And it's also important to keep in mind that after a huge restructuring of the 1.0 plot and developing a certain amount of things for the next several months going forward, it's safe to say that it will take a while for the impact of our feedback to take effect on the character designs and the story. Regardless of the homogenization in the designs, I can understand why Kuro Games wants to just go for the safest option that's trendy right now, just to get their foot in the door with a new game. And as a longtime PGR player, I have full faith in Kuro Games to make really interesting characters and a pretty awesome story, regardless of the designs of the characters. At least in anything after 1.0, because that was, something.
Understood. Watch out, everyone.
We did it.
The chapter with Scar was great though. But to answer the question that started this all, are there too few male characters in Wuthering Waves? Well, let me start by saying I prefer to play female characters myself. Always have. But when Wuthering Waves launched, I thought the 10:6 ratio was pretty good. The variety appealed to a wider demographic, and that demographic includes more women, which I love to see. However, by patch 1.4, that ratio is now 17:7, not including Rover, and I think Wuthering Waves is overdue for releasing another cool guy. Maybe Geshu Lin, or Scar, or somebody else? Either way, it's important to remember that Kuro Games did not promise more male characters specifically. That was a false rumor based on mistranslation. But this is a question that I really want to point towards you guys. I want you to tell me whether you think the ratio is good right now, and if you think the designs are good right now, and if you think the writing is good right now. If you would like to see a more balanced ratio of male characters going forward, I want to hear it. Frankly, I think fans who love both male and female characters equally must be eating really well because the characters are solid in general here. I mean, I wouldn't be so obsessed with this game otherwise. And no character is more solid than Changli, so let me tell you why she's so wonderful in this video.